All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Team here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 142, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And before I get started, I just want to say that I have some announcement/question that I will do at the very end of the podcast. So if you're regularly watching this, please, either watch the end when the VOD is out or stick around and give me your feedback, because I'm thinking about changing how I do the whole thing and I essentially want to hear from you guys. Anyway, back to the podcast. We do have quite a few cool things here today, so let's get cracking right away. As usual, the first section of the week is getting started. We got 4 articles here. And of course, this is the time when my cat decides to start destroying the paper. So if you hear any weird sounds in the background, you know what it is. Anyway, getting started section. We got 4 pretty good articles here, starting with adding video with Vime.js. This is a really good tutorial on Vime.js, a video player, or I guess video media framework that is essentially working with pretty much any existing front-end frameworks out there, React, Angular, Vue, Svelte. They have adapters for everything, and it looks really damn good. I never heard about it. Cat, could you please? She just decided to run around and destroy. I don't know. Can you hear that actually? Hey Kevin, welcome to the stream. Hey Malaf, welcome guys. All right, so back to the article. I don't know, can you hear any weird sounds from the background? Because I'm not sure if Mike even picks that up, but she is being obnoxiously loud. Anyway, back to the Vime. So, as I said, it's a media framework that allows you to create a video or audio players, and it seems to be pretty flexible. Again, as I said, it has adapters for all the front-end frameworks. This specific tutorial talks about the using it with React. So if you are working with media and wanted to find some nice media player that also supports stuff like YouTube, Vimeo, or whatever, then do check this article out. Maybe this is exactly what you want. Okay, we can hear. Okay, yes, it's a Miss Cat, and yes, she's being... What? Yeah, that's a perfect time to run around, right? She was just sleeping like 2 seconds ago, and I start talking, and she wakes up and starts running around. Anyway, hi Marina, welcome to the stream. All right, continuing, the next article we got here is Recoil in Action, building a reusable code block component. This is a pretty nice tutorial on the Recoil.js and how it works. If you never heard about it, this is the sort of another library from Facebook people or for state management in React. It's actually a really powerful one and works really well when you have these sort of medium-sized states to manage. And this tutorial does a pretty good job of showing how exactly to use it and how to utilize the features that it basically provides. That cat. How to utilize the features that it basically provides in terms of, the atomic state management, which, again, works really, really well on a medium-sized state. So I'm not sure, I haven't tried to use it in actually extremely large project that has a lot of state to manage, but in small to medium sized, it works perfectly well. And some of the features it has is just mind-blowingly awesome. So if you never tried it, do give this article a read. It's actually a really good write-up. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff in here. Okay. Continuing, we got a website with a ton of advertisements for Black Friday, but you know what, that's fine. So the article is titled Understanding React useReducer Hook. It's actually a part of the course that they have here. This is a really, really big and really detailed write-up on the useReducer hook. Like pretty much everything you can imagine that is related to useReducer is probably covered in this article. So if you are getting started with React and you wasn't sure what exactly the useReducer hook is, do absolutely check this out. And if you like this article, do check out their course as well, because Mr. Tyler McGinnis is actually, at least, from the articles and his tweets, he does some really cool work. So if you are interested in the course, do check it out as well, because again, it's Black Friday, there's 25% off, and there's apparently limited spots for whatever reason. But anyway. The article itself is amazingly good and very detailed and large. So if you are unsure what the useReducer hook does and how it works, then this is a really good place to get started. All right, continuing, we got Boop, a whimsical twist on hover transitions. Probably my favorite article this week, at least from the getting started section, maybe even from all of them. So this one is sort of a tutorial slash exploration, I guess, of how to animate things, hover transitions specifically, on things to make them more nice, I guess, right? And first of all, those examples are really, really cool. Second of all, this is essentially a tutorial for the React Spring, which is an amazing library. And this basically walks you step by step through how exactly to use it, how to do things like that, how to use this Spring to do the sort of rotation hover animations. And it's great. So if you never used React Spring and you are wondering how exactly do you do something like, the animations you've seen here with hooks, so in this case it uses hooks exclusively, do check this one out. It's a really great article, cool write-up, and yeah, definitely a very, very good starting point for React Spring. Right. That's it for the getting started section. Now we are getting to the news and articles. We got two things here today. The first one is a Conclave case study. So this is a really, really big write-up on the essentially how Conclave works. So Conclave is this peer-to-peer editor, collaborative text editor. I believe it's peer-to-peer. Am I getting this out of my ass or something? Wait a second. So I know that it's collaborative editor for sure, but I remember reading somewhere that it was a peer-to-peer as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Wait a second. Peer-to-peer. Yes, it is peer-to-peer. Okay, so I'm not inventing things. It is peer-to-peer. So it's peer-to-peer collaborative editor. And this article talks about how exactly it works under the hood. And, the most interesting part is obviously the conflict resolution and syncing across multiple nodes, which is, if you ever try to do this, you know that this is one hell of a problem to solve. And the write-up is absolutely fascinating. As you can see here, the article is incredibly large, incredibly detailed, and there is a whole ton of really cool stuff on conflict resolution, on peer-to-peer technologies, on messaging, on the architecture of their backend, and so on and so forth. It is absolutely fascinating. If you have like an hour of your time and you wanted to learn more about, WebRTC, peer-to-peer architectures, collaborative editing, conflict resolutions, do absolutely read this article. There is some really cool stuff here. Okay, next article we got here is a bit shorter, but it's still really cool. So it's Skypack plus CodePen. It's a sort of write-up from CodePen guys that talks about the Skypack and the fact that they're basically using it now to power the CodePens, which is kind of cool. And it also goes through all of the cool things that Skypack actually does, which is actually really awesome. Like some of those features I never even knew about, and they sound really, really cool. We probably should do a Skypack stream at one point because it really looks like a very, very nice package. So yeah, if you're curious about what exactly they do with Skypack and CodePen, how exactly it helps them, what are the features they use, do check this article out. All right, that's it for the articles and news. Now we got the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Starting with the ECMAScript proposal updates from the November 2020. So I think I already covered the module blocks that moved to stage 1 on one of the previous podcasts, but now we got this sort of official summing up of all the things. And yeah, so there's module blocks that are now stage 1. There's extensions that are now stage 1. So this is sort of the evolution of the bind operator, if you ever seen it or remember about it. Like this thing, it's been in proposals since 2016, 15, maybe. Like it's been ages. I think it was one of the first proposals actually that was probably added to address the sort of thing with the that eventually got addressed by the arrow functions that bound the functions to the classes in React, for example, right? Because people were suggesting to use this instead. And it never got accepted. I don't even know what the state of it is. It's probably like still stage 1 or even stage 0 or something like Strawman. Does it have any state here? It doesn't even have any state here. So I am not exactly sure what is going on, but there's now a new proposal that's supposed to fix all the issues that the bind operator had, and it's going to be called the extensions and the double colon operator, I guess. I'm not sure how to read that. So it is, apparently it's stage 1 now, so no longer stage 0, even though it still says it's on README. But essentially it works more or less the same way. It allows you to do the bound operators and bind them to the thing that you call them on, essentially, right? Which seems pretty good. So it's like, I can see this being helpful in some cases, and you know, it's obviously better than writing this with the .call, which, you know, you can do, but it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And just having some syntactic sugar to simplify that could be very helpful in a lot of cases. So we'll see how that develops. Again, as I said, you know, the original bind operator has been out there for hell knows how long. We're going to see how that develops. What else is there? Yeah, the error clause moved to stage 2, and that's pretty much it. So it seems like the meeting was relatively minor in this case, or at least in terms of, you know, the proposal changes. Okay, the next cool thing we got here is ESM-CJS interop tasks. So we are at this stage where ESM is, you know, widespread enough and implemented pretty much everywhere. The problem is that a lot of tools that we already have ESM working with, like Babel, for example, they don't really follow this spec, or at least not all of them and not in all cases. So apparently there's a need to have this sort of the interop task that shows you how different tools, frameworks, and libraries actually handle ES modules versus CommonJS. That includes Node.js, that includes Babel, Node.js. There is, I believe, Webpack and a bunch of other tools that also have the ES modules support. And holy crap, there is a ton of differences here. I will be very interesting to see, like I assume eventually we're basically gonna converge into, you know, everyone using the specs, right? But right now this is not exactly straightforward. Like, majority of them work in exactly the same way you would expect, but some of them are like, yeah, we're just gonna deviate even so slightly over here, and as you might expect, these small deviations might lead to some weird behaviors when you use tools like this. But anyway, if you are working with ES modules and you were curious as to, you know, how good is interop right now in different tools, do check this one out. It's actually a really good test, as typically tends to be from people like Sokra. But yeah. Okay, next thing we got here is a tip from the web platform News Twitter, that you can actually detect if the user is using touchscreen using CSS. So if the CSS any pointer coarse media query evaluates to true, the user likely has a touchscreen. So it doesn't guarantee that he only has a touchscreen, but it basically will say that, okay, there's actually a touch capability, so you can like make your buttons bigger or whatever, which sounds pretty handy, to be honest. Like, I don't know how good it is with, you know, the bigger devices with touchscreens being more widespread right now. You know, like you have the laptops that have touchscreen, you have the tablets that are really, really big right now, but still can be quite handy. So if you are working a lot with touch devices and you were wondering how you can detect them using CSS, then there you go. There's a media query for that. That kind of helps, I guess. I don't think it guarantees that it's going to be a touchscreen, but it says likely, so I'm guessing there's a pretty good chance there. All right. Continuing, we got, today I learned that the browser's built-in form validation features are surprisingly robust. So I knew that form validation features existed in tags, right? So there's like some min and max stuff, for example, and required that I use quite frequently. But I did not know that there's actually a ton more of them, and they are really, really powerful. Like, it seems like most of the time, unless you have something very complex, you don't even actually need any JavaScript. You can just define it through the built-in capabilities, which is kind of awesome. So if you're working with forms and you didn't want to drag in JavaScript to validate some stuff like URLs, phones, emails, passwords, and texts, then there you go. You can actually do it by just, specifying some properties on the input field, which is kind of awesome. Hey, Major Malfunction, welcome to the stream. All right, that's it for the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Now we are coming to the releases section. We got 5 of them here, starting with Cypress version 6.0, that finally brings the sci.intercept command that is essentially reworked sci route 2, which can intercept, modify, and wait on any type of HTTP request from your app, be it XHR, fetch, or whatever, so you're no longer limited to using XHRs just because you want to intercept them with Cypress. You can just use seintercept and it will work exactly the way you expect it, which is freaking fantastic, by the way. If you ever tried waiting on requests with Cypress and it was fetch, you know how painful that is, how many workarounds there were. But this makes it a ton easier. There's also a bunch of breaking changes. This is exactly why it's 6.0, so make sure to look through the changes, and there's a migration guide if you need one. But the sim, seems pretty straightforward, and it is a very welcome major release, to be honest. Okay, next thing we got here is Node.js version 15.3, which I believe adds a bunch of, among other things, that support for abort signal for HTTP requests, so you can now actually abort requests that are using the HTTP request node natively using the abort signal, which is great. Other stuff is pretty minor. The next release we got here is Node 12.20, which is the previous LTS version that is still LTS. And the cool thing here is that it actually now supports exports pattern and named exports via CJS, which is basically, I believe, brings it on par to the module support with the LTS version, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm not really tracking the older LTS versions that much, but yes, exports pattern support is freaking great, and you should be using it right now, especially so if you target multiple node versions. So there you go. Right, next release we got here is Prettier version 2.2 that has the new JavaScript parsers, TS 4.1 support, and ESM standalone bundles if you need those, which is kind of great. So yeah, as usual, there's like a ton of changes here. So if you're curious, do check it out. There's like billion changes to different languages as usual. So yes. Tim, what I have to do to get an epic beard like yours? I mean, basically just do nothing and not shave ever. I'm still trying to get a hang of, shaping it correctly because I think it's a bit of a mess right now, but it will probably take some time. But anyway, yes, it mostly comes down to being very, very lazy. Anyway, continuing, we got Apollo Client version 3.3.0. Now, here's the thing. This is probably my only gripe with Apollo client or Apollo ecosystem, I guess, that I have. Who releases minor version and says, hey, there's potentially breaking changes? If there's potentially breaking changes, this should be a major release, right? This is how the semantic versioning works, but I guess that's not the case here. Anyway. Yeah, so the thing is that basically it's a minor release and it mostly does with some improvements. It does changes some functionality of the things like mock providers, mock links, HTTP links that might be potentially breaking. And again, it irks me the wrong way because they consider this a minor update. We actually had one of the apps where we used Apollo break straight up because of the minor updates that contained breaking changes. And they were like, no, that's just minor stuff. I was like, yeah, okay. This, again, as I said, this is literally my only gripe with Apollo, and this is why you need to have tests when you use them, because otherwise you won't know if just upgrading to next minor version will break your stuff or not. So, yeah, other than that, seems like a solid release. There's some pretty good updates and fixes and changes, and some other, bug fixes and memory conservation efforts, I guess, which is a terrible way to put it, but there you go. Right, that's it for the releases. Now we are coming to the libs and demos. We got quite a few of them here today. Some of them are actually really, really cool. And let me just open up all of this. Let me have a look at the chat. First time being able to follow your stream live. Great to see you online. Hey Tognitas, welcome to the stream. Nice to see you as well. I'm apparently cannot speak. Okay, back to the demos we go. The first demo we got here today is it's actually haven't started yet. So it's a website called pwadvent.dev, so progressive web app advent in one word. And it actually sounds like a really fun little project. So somebody, I believe it was people from Google, if I remember correctly, but although I might be mistaken, so don't quote me on that. It's essentially an advent calendar that will highlight one progressive web app feature every day in December and basically show you what you can do with the web platform, which actually is really, really cool. And I was thinking, it would be cool to do, I don't know, stream every day to check out those features, but then I thought it would be a bit too much work to do that. But anyway, if you are interested in web development, like progressive web features that allow you to do native app-like capabilities, I guess, in the browser, right? Do check this one out. It's probably going to be cool. I believe it was from the, what is that team of the next Google OS that is very heavily web-based? I keep forgetting the name. The one that was supposed to be replacement for Android, but ended up not being replacement for Android. Oh God, what was the name of it? Wait a second. Blah blah blah. No, that was not it. Privacy credits. That is legal. Preact, Nico Dev. No, that was not it. Fuchsia, right? Fuchsia. Yeah. You are talking about Fuchsia. That was exactly that. I believe this website is made by one of the members of the Fuchsia team. Okay, not that Fuchsia. Oh, is it Fuchsia, not Fuchsia? Okay, that's a different thing. Yes, so it's a Fuchsia OS, which is still, I guess it's replacements for Chrome OS and Android. But as far as I know, for now, we only have like a bunch of the development docs that are in sort of a state that is very hard to read unless you want to do a deep dive for like a few weeks and just, find out on your own what it actually does. But we do know for a fact that it tries to push the web forward and allow the progressive web apps to be like first-party citizens. So yeah, again, I think the website is like the pwadvent is a really cool project. So we're going to see what kind of features will it bring and what will it highlight. And if there's anything new and awesome, we might as well do some streams on that. Okay, continuing, we got ezmm, I guess, or ESM, I'm not sure how to read that. It's an easy ES module manager to use modern JavaScript, as the description says. Essentially, seems like it's sort of installer for modules, I guess, that basically allows you to install modules locally that will automatically pull the ES modules instead of the CommonJS modules, so you can just import them in your project, in your web browser by just saying import modules React, for example, which I believe it's similar to how the Snowpack works, for example, but yeah. Why pronounce W as V? Because Germans do that and Russians do that as well, actually, so I still cannot get rid of that habit. But yes, you are right, it should be pwadvent. But it's just so hard to say, like pwadvent is way easier to say than pwadvent. Although I know that is not technically correct. Anyway, continuing, we got txtai.js, AI-powered search engine for JavaScript. This one is pretty cool. So it's basically, there's a txtai Python library, I believe, that essentially allows you to ask natural language questions to any text that you can throw at it, right? So what the author did, he took that model, compiled it for JavaScript, and allow you to do exactly the same on your web pages, right? So you can basically insert the txtai.js into the page. It will process the page and then allow you to ask natural language questions against the text on this page, which is pretty damn cool. So if you ever wanted to do something like this, do check this one out. It's actually a really nice library. Okay, continuing, we got momoa, JSON parser, tokenizer, traverser, and printer. So yeah, just as it says, it's sort of the JSON parser, tokenizer, and serializer, I guess. Convert JSON to AST and then convert it back to JSON. Again, limited use cases probably, because there's, stuff like Esprima and a bunch of other more generic parsers, but, maybe this is exactly what you were looking for. Same reason why it said Volkswagen instead of Volkswagen. Yeah, I mean, Germans pronounce it that way, right? And the Russians are the same because we don't really have the W in our alphabet, so it's just V, and that's it. Anyway, continuing, we got survey library, a JavaScript survey and form library. So this is, yeah, exactly what you would expect it to. A very simple library to make surveys. Seems pretty straightforward. Does have a whole ton of features with things like, text questions, matrix questions, panels, expressions, whatever. There's like a ton of different features. So if you're working a lot with service and you wanted to build your own, do check this one out. Also has adapters for just about anything, including jQuery even. Svelte is not here, but it's probably not that hard to use it in Svelte without by yourself, basically. Okay, continuing, we got timebomb. Yeah. So this one is, so it's a cross-line library for making sure devs get to solve all important to-dos. The way it does it is essentially you call a timebomb and you say warn after a specific date, right? Or slow after a specific date. And once this date is done, your code will either warn you by saying, hey, there's a whatever thing, you should fix it, right? Or it will literally start slowing down your function calls until you are forced to, well, probably remove this line or fix the issue, right? And I'm not sure I would use that, to be honest, but that sounds like the recipe for disaster when you can just fail after a specific date, forget about it, and then your code suddenly stops working. You're like, what the hell's going on? But maybe you are the person who needs exactly this to happen to you to fix your issues and update your to-dos, then, do check it out. It's available for Node.js and Python, so if you're using any of those languages, you can do that. Okay, continuing, we got pg-mem, in-memory Postgres DB instance for your unit tests. So if you are using any backends that uses the Postgres as a database and you need some sort of an in-memory database for tests and you didn't want to set up the whole thing using Docker or whatever, then this actually seems like a very nice way of doing it. I typically do use the in-mem MongoDB instances when I'm doing the tests for the, in test environments, because spinning up the real ones is always a bit of a pain in the ass. Although for end-to-end tests, you should be doing that. But yeah, it seems nice. So basically in-memory Postgres, if you are running tests and need to spin up temporary databases, do check this one out. Continuing, we got react-tensorflow, a set of TensorFlow hooks for React.js. If you ever wanted to use TensorFlow directly from React, this seems like a nice way to do that. It's pretty straightforward. The hook seems quite nice. Again, the API is pretty simple. And nothing too fancy over here, but seems like a very nice library. Okay, continuing, we got retes, a typed declarative data-driven and functional routing for Node.js. So this seems to be a purely router declared in a functional manner. Again, I'm not a fan of ways to declare stuff like this, mostly because it typically tends to be quite hard to read, at least for me. But maybe you do like approaches like this, so do check this one out. Again, I would personally stick to something like Fastify, but this doesn't look half bad. Okay, continuing, we got Mozilla web-ext, a command line tool to help build, run, and test web extensions. Just as it says, basically a tooling that will scaffolds, build, and run extensions for you. From what I've read, some people are not exactly happy about that, the direction the Firefox takes in terms of extensions, because if you are building extensions for Chrome, for example, you can just press a button, import unpacked extension, and start working with it. Well, it seems like the latest versions of Firefox doesn't actually allow you to do that unless you sign your extension, which sounds weird as hell. Like, how would you develop that? And apparently the answer to how is using this web-ext thing that would sort of sign even the build versions for it, which is like a bit of a weird decision in my opinion. I mean, I get the security and everything, but come on, that's just pain in the ass and just additional steps that will, how do I say it, prevent developers from starting off quickly, which is, I don't know, I always feel that this is annoying. Too much friction in development is always annoying, at least to me. But yeah, if you are working with extensions and you needed to build one for Firefox, this seems to be the way to go now. Okay, continuing, we got auger-state, the delightful and hook-first global state management for React that let components drill down and subscribe to only the parts of the state they need. So essentially, it's kind of like Recoil, but with slightly different APIs. So you still have only one store in this case. but you can subscribe to specific properties of that store, and the hooks you have will only be called whenever those properties changed, which, seems like a nice approach. Again, I'm not sure I like the API it has, but, it's a sort of preferential thing. And I would probably prefer the Recoil approach with atoms rather than the one centralized store, at least at this stage. But, if you were looking for something like this, do check this one out. It actually seems like a nice state management thingy. Okay, continuing, we got Spotify react-to-chart, or I guess reactochart. Yeah, that's probably reactochart. React-chart component library from Spotify people, and a really good one. So like it has probably pretty much everything you can imagine you might want with regards to charts, including even stuff like zoom container that allows you to natively zoom in and out of any charts that you render with a very, very nice layout. So if you are using React and wanted to do some fancy charts and needed a library for that, do check this one out. This actually has just about anything you might imagine you might ever want in charts. There are some types of charts missing, but not that many of them, so majority of those are here. And yeah, it's a charting library, so there you go. Okay, continuing, we got TypeScriptToLua, thing I have no idea why you would need. I mean, I can imagine some use cases, but that seems like a very esoteric thing to, have or want. It's basically a thing that allows you to compile TypeScript into Lua script. And while there is quite a lot of games, for example, that use Lua as embedded engine, I don't know why you would want to compile TypeScript into Lua, because Lua is not majorly different from JavaScript. So you probably are, if you can write JavaScript, it's not that hard to learn Lua. And why? I mean, I guess type safety is one thing, but it just feels a bit weird to me. But anyway, if you ever wanted to write TypeScript and then compile it to Lua for some reason, do check this one out. It actually looks really solid. It also is curious how it handles the typings of the target Lua environments, because, if you write Lua for, say, World of Warcraft extensions, it's going to have one set of global classes, and you probably need some sort of a global types for TypeScript to properly work with that. And it's a good question of how exactly it works, so I don't really have an answer to that, but it's an interesting project nonetheless. Okay. Last thing we got here for today in Libs and Demos is Zettlr. It's a markdown editor for 21st century. So this is Electron-based markdown editor with a whole ton of features. There is even exports into pandoc, LaTeX, and text bundles, and basically probably whatever you can imagine in an editor. Apologies, it's probably here. So if you were looking for a very fancy markdown editor with a ton of features that is open source and built with web technologies, do check this one out. Actually, it looks really solid. Right, that's it for Libs and Demos. Now we are coming to the interesting and silly stuff, and the only thing we got here for today is booting from a vinyl record. Yes, you heard that right. Somebody created a DOS boot disk and I'm not sure burned it is a correct word here, but burned it to a vinyl disc records. And that's apparently a thing, and it works. And yes, there's a video with ear rape warning because it's very loud because, well, it's a vinyl disc, right? It's kind of bonkers that it actually works, but that reminds me of my first computer that I had that booted off the magnet discs. Magnet tapes, and that thing was loud as well. Probably not as loud as this one, but still, I was like, yeah. Anyway, if you're curious about the details, do check out the article. It's pretty entertaining, but yes. We'll be playing Doom stored on vinyl. I'm pretty sure someone will do it at this point, maybe the same author. I don't think it's that hard. I mean, the original Doom is relatively small, right? But yes, that's actually it from my side for today. ZX Spectrum, yes, this is exactly what the, I guess it's probably console, not a computer, right? It's a question. Is it technically considered a computer or is it a console? Because I was a very small kid back at time, but I still do remember how we, they used the tapes to boot this thing, and I guess it's a computer, right? Yes, it is a home computer, okay. Yeah, okay, it was released in '82, but I believe we only had it like 90 something because otherwise I wouldn't remember. It was probably 992 or something, 10 years later when it got around to Russia finally. But yeah, that was quite a thing. Anyway, that's it from my side. So if you guys have any questions or suggestions, feel free to throw them into the chat. As usual, you can find all the links on GitHub or on bxjs.dev. Now, I do have one last thing to talk about. So here's the deal. I've been, looking back at all the older episodes of BxJS Weekly that I was basically doing and thinking that I am not satisfied with the format we have here. I guess you could say I'm getting tired a bit of going through the same news again and again and again. And the problem is that majority of articles we got here for getting started, for articles, for tips, for even demos, a lot of them overlap, right? So it's like you look at the Recoil tutorial, I think we probably had like 10 of them or something by this point. Let's just try and search for it. Recoil. So there's 1, there's 2, yeah, okay, so it's at least a couple, right? And the longer we go, the more of them will be there. And I just feel like it's not worth the time to sit here and talk about the same things over and over and over again. Now, I still want to collect them because I know that there are people who might find them useful by just going through the text, right, themselves. What I want to try to do is I want to try to change the format of the podcast itself. I want to basically, I still have only ideas, very rough one. I don't want to cancel it, so that's not the thing that I want to do. I still enjoy talking about some of those things. But I do want to change it in a way that I basically only focus on the coolest and most interesting things in a week. For those of you who are basically still watching the podcast, for those of you who watch the VODs or listen to this, please do let me know what you think about that. What do you think about more condensed, more focused podcast that will only talk about the most interesting pieces, maybe most interesting libraries and most interesting releases, and basically skip everything else and just leave it for your own reading if you want to. Because I feel like I'm getting burned out talking about the same things over and over again. Most of the time it's just me like, hey, this is a tutorial about Recoil. Let's get moving. And I don't feel like it's worth it. So let me guys know what you think about this kind of approach. Again, if you have any better ideas, I'm open for that. I just, a bit tired of basically repeating the same things over and over again about different articles. But yeah. Let me have a look at the chat. How's the proposal going? We've finished the English version. The people who mentor us from the university are happy with the state. So my colleagues, my German-speaking colleagues have started translating it into German because it has to be in German. And we are now in progress of doing the pilot project with a pretty big company that does... Okay, I don't want to spoil anything just yet, but essentially they have like few hundred customers, and we are going to be piloting the very, very rough prototype with them to see if we can actually provide them the federated search capabilities they want, because they turned out that they also have this problem. And if our pilot is successful, it's probably going to be very good for us, but we'll see how that develops. Anyway, it's going good, basically. All of that stuff is extremely slow because it's a German company. And if you ever work with German companies, you know, they are very laid back most of the time and take their time doing stuff. So it's, we're probably not going to be doing the pilot project itself until January or something. And then the proposal itself, the guys have to translate it. Then we have to fill out the forms. Then we have to sign it. The university have to approve it. So it's probably going to be submitted in January or something as well. If we're lucky, we're going to get the money in February, but, we have quite a few LOIs now, so that should be good, I hope. If we won't get money in February, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life, but we're going to see about that. Let me have a look at the chat. If you keep doing the GitHub and in video you talk what you want. Yeah, so that's the idea. I keep doing the GitHub in the same manner that I do right now. But during the podcast, I basically will only focus on the coolest things that I personally think that are, either something new or something cool, something I didn't know, something that I want to highlight, stuff like this. I agree, continue collecting them and just mention them during the stream. Just say, okay, we have one React tutorial, one Angular tutorial. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is okay. So I thought maybe completely skip them, but that's a good idea to just basically briefly mention, hey, there's this tutorial about the video player, tutorial about state management. Yeah, that might be a way to go actually. Instead of just, opening and going into them. That's a good idea. Thank you. Maybe it could be nice to have very short live coding session. Very short. Can you, Massimo? Can you elaborate on this a bit, please? Because I'm confused as to what you mean by that. As in within the BxJS Weekly podcasts, coding sessions on the things that I find interesting. Is that what you mean? Because I am like, my coding sessions never end up being short. Let's just put it this way. I always get distracted and just spend a ton of time doing things. When speaking about library, for instance. Yeah, okay, so I understood it correctly. That sounds interesting. We could try that. Let me just write this down. You know what? So if yeah, okay, so that's a good idea. So short code samples during Libs talk. Okay, yeah, that sounds, I mean, that's interesting. I agree, that sounds interesting. I'm not sure if it will work out, but definitely sounds interesting. So thank you very much for feedback. Gem of the week. Yeah, that's okay. So if there's only one coolest library and we do one sort of code snippet test with it, that would definitely work. That's really cool. That's a cool idea. Thank you very much, guys. Okay. Right. Any more questions, suggestions, or things you guys want to talk about? And yeah, so I'll have to think about that. But I think starting the next episode, we're basically going to try to change things quite a bit. Because again, as I said, I feel like we need to change something. All of that stuff is not exactly working out for me, at least. Maybe take the most interesting things from the podcast and make a coding stream about it. Well, I mean, this is what I've been doing for the most time, right? So we usually, like, if I saw something really cool on a podcast, I typically couldn't contain myself and just jumped on it next week to do some live streams and check out how exactly it works or what it does. But okay, I admit that, it's at this point, it happens not that often. What's the best library to use the global state in React with hooks? That again comes down to what your state looks like. If it's small state, then just using context usually works fine. If it's medium-sized state, I would go for something like Recoil or unstated or whatever. And if it's something really big, then you would likely want Redux or Apollo GraphQL or whatever that already allows you to have those fancy capabilities such as caching and persistent, like local persistence and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for providing great content. Yeah, I mean, thank you for watching it. I think I already said it numerous times, but I wouldn't be doing this without you guys and without your feedback, without just sitting here chatting with you, because I think this is the primary reason I actually do this, to just sit here, chill, and chat with you guys. Okay, but anyway, any other questions, suggestions, or I guess we can just wrap it up here and go have an awesome weekend. Okay, there's a ton of questions. It's difficult to arrange, but what about collaboration or intervention, small talks with other devs? Yeah, I think it comes down to basically having enough time to coordinate all of that. And during this year, I had negative amounts of time, mostly to, like my psychological burnout and then some startup issues. And then maybe next year I'll finally get around to actually working with other people. But I don't know. I think if I would ever, I'm not against that, but if I would ever do something like this, it has to be the other person who would basically drag me into this, organize and tell me, you got to show up on this date from this time and like do your stuff, because otherwise I just wouldn't be able to do that. Is it possible to build a auth without using stores like Vuex, or should we use some kind of state management thing? I mean, for a auth, if you just use cookies, that's enough, right? So like if you have cookies and you basically let your browser handle a auth, that should work. Again, that depends on what kind of app and what kind of auth we're talking, but in a very basic manner of speaking, I guess in a very basic case of it, just using cookies should be sufficient. Great stream. Thank you, team. Thank you for watching, Joachim. Was pleasure to have you guys. Okay, any more questions, suggestions, or things you guys want to talk about, or should we write it up? Wrap this up. God, why is it so hard to talk sometimes? I don't know. Why not make a tutorial on Traversy Media channel? Wait, you could. I thought it was like, isn't Traversy Media like one guy basically? That was my impression for it actually. But web development tutorials, courses. Oh, okay, I see. So this is, yeah, I thought it was like Brett Traversy and he was the only guy who created the tutorial. Am I misunderstanding how it works? Because my impression was basically that there's the Brad and he does the tutorials and that's literally the only guy who does it. I guess then 800 videos from one guy would be a bit hard. So maybe you are right. Unless he's doing it for like 10 years now. Nope, he went to management. Oh, interesting. So I guess he's big enough now to just manage other people doing videos. Interesting. Well, I mean, again, you know, I'm not against that, but if I could find time to do all of that fancy stuff, that would be great. He did all tutorials himself. Okay. I mean, yeah, you know, I get the idea. So he just basically grew big enough to span out into sort of becoming a network rather than the being the one-person channel. I totally get that. I think it happens to everyone who basically grows large enough because you cannot physically maintain the same performance when you are, you know, when there's a million people and they expect you to look at 220 different things. That makes perfect sense. Having guests to give tutorial on his channel. I mean, that's pretty cool. So like, yeah, I would probably do that if there was some sort of an invitation or whatever. I have no idea how it works. So, you know, like I'm not tracking his stuff that closely. I mostly like open it and will look at it whenever it pops up in a YouTube stream or something. But yeah, again, not against that, but don't have time to actively organize anything like that. Purely because the YouTube is not the main thing that I do, right? So I spend a couple of hours per week at most on everything I do here, and mostly happens live. So like this is the reason why I'm doing live streams, right? Instead of like videos that I did before, because it's easy. You just start live streaming, you jump in, you talk about stuff, you do things live, and then you close it down. You don't have to spend time editing. You don't have to spend time planning. Well, not too much time anyway. Like for the dev streams, I still have to spend some time digging around for libraries and investigating the bugs if I need to. But most of the time is just, you know, this is essentially why I pick live streaming over actual like edited tutorials. I know that if I would to, you know, edit tutorials and do like 15-minute, 20-minute videos, it would be it would perform a lot better on YouTube, but I simply don't have time for that. It's basically as easy as that. But yeah, anyway, any more questions or suggestions, guys? If not, let's just wrap it up here and gonna go eat something, I think, because I'm getting pecky. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, as I said, you can find all the links on GitHub. You can find all the links on bxjs.dev. You can join our Discord if you want to chat about any of that or ask for help on JavaScript or just talk about something. You can follow me on Twitter for my random JavaScript posts, video game posts, and other bullshit that I do there. And I sometimes retweet very good stuff from people who actually know what they're doing. And I think that basically covers it. So it doesn't seem like we have any more questions or suggestions. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the stream. And yeah, have an awesome rest of the weekend or rest of the week if you're watching the video of this. And I see you on Wednesday for some programming, maybe earlier if things go the way I've planned them to be. So watch out for the announcements on the channel. Right, guys, have a great day, and I see you next time.